The space between the words you are reading right now did not always exist. For most of European history, 1,000 years of Greek and 1,000 of Latin, text ran together in one long unbroken ribbon, Scriptio continua licathis. It was in the silence of Irish monasteries, sometime in the 7th and 8th centuries, that monks, struggling to read Latin as a foreign tongue, began to leave a small gap. One gap, then another. Every space your eyes will rest in tonight is a small inheritance from a stone-floored Irish scriptorium. This is a quiet place to fall asleep and to wake up knowing one small thing you didn't know before. So let your shoulders drop. Let the day slip from your hands. Let the room around you grow softer, the edges of things less sharp. Slow your breath. There is nothing more to hold on to tonight, and nothing more to do. Tonight you are a young monk on the river Shannon. The year is somewhere in the early 800s. The air smells of peat smoke and cattle, and the bell has not yet rung. We are going to spend one quiet day in monastic Ireland together, from the dark before dawn into the great silence of the night. You wake to the bell, not because the day has begun. The day has not begun. The world outside is still black, but because the bell ringer, somewhere in the small wooden tower beyond the dormitory wall, has been awake for nearly an hour, watching a candle. The candle is marked along its side with thin rings of dark wax, one for each hour. The bell ringer's whole job tonight has been to sit and watch the small flame slide down past one ring, then the next. When the flame reaches the right mark, he pulls the rope. That is how time is kept here, in the early 800s, in the silence before clocks. There is also a small bowl of water in the same room, with a slow leak from a copper spout, a kind of slow water clock, the kind the Greeks called a clepsydra. The bell ringer can compare the two, the candle and the water. The night quietly being measured by light and by drip. The word in your own English, 1,000 years from now, for the middle of the day, noon, is traveling toward you across the centuries from this very system of hours. It does not yet mean midday. In your century, noon, from the Latin nona, the 9th hour, falls in the late afternoon. But over the next few hundred years, monks like you, hungry for the meal that comes after none, will keep nudging the prayer earlier and earlier until the word noon comes to rest at the middle of the clock face. Every clock face still bears that slow drift. Every time someone says noon, they are saying a word that wandered, century by century, from 3 in the afternoon to 12 at midday, carried on the appetite of monks. But that is for the future. For now, the word still means what it should mean, and the night is still the night. The bell rings. It is a small, square-mouthed, hand-held bell of iron. Bells like this are sacred objects in your country. Pilgrims swear oaths on them, as men in other lands swear on the Gospels. The bell that once belonged to your church's founding Saint Patrick still exists somewhere, kept by a hereditary keeper, wrapped in linen, brought out only for the gravest oaths and for the inauguration of kings. People believe that to swear falsely on a saint's bell is to be cursed. To break one would be like breaking a finger of a saint. That same small iron bell, plain and square-mouthed, will outlive every king who ever swears on it, and outlive your monastery, and outlive your country in any form you would recognize, and in the end will sit, 1200 years from now, in a glass case in a quiet room in a city called Dublin, where strangers from every part of the world will walk past it and read its small label and not quite understand that the object behind the glass is the same object an abbot once held up by the same handle in front of a king. Your own bell, the one ringing now, is humbler, but it is made of the same metal and rung by the same kind of hand. It rings and rings. You sit up on the rush mat. The dormitory is unheated. Irish monasteries do not heat the sleeping rooms, partly out of poverty, partly out of principle. You slept in your woolen robe. You sleep in your robe every night. The cold of the stone floor reaches up through the rush and finds your feet, and your feet remember, as they always do at this hour, that this is the cold the day begins with. Around you, in the long low room, the other monks are stirring. 40 rush mats, 40 grey shapes. No one speaks. Since the last office of yesterday, Compline, the office of the falling light, no one has spoken. This is what the rule calls the great silence, and it does not break until after Lauds, the office of the dawn, 2 services from now. Between Compline and Lauds, the monastery is, in principle, a wordless place. There is more to the silence than the absence of speech. It is, the older brothers say, a way of letting God speak instead. When you do not speak, you hear the small night sounds of the monastery, as if they were sentences. The wind, the fire settling somewhere far off in a kitchen banked for the morning. A dog, somewhere by the gate, dreaming. The river, always the river, beyond the wall. The river never sleeps, the older brothers say, and a man who has lived here a long time begins to hear the river as a kind of voice, low and steady, that has been speaking since long before any monk arrived, and will still be speaking long after the last one leaves. In practice, of course, the silence is not perfect. A mat creaks, someone coughs, someone somewhere sniffs against the cold, but the silence is the rule, and the rule in your country, in this century, is everything. You stand, you feel the rough wool of the robe slip back into place around your knees. You feel the cold of the stones through the thin leather of your sandals. Sandals even in winter, even now, the senior monks walk barefoot. You will in a few years walk barefoot too, for now your feet are still soft, still ashamed of themselves. The bell ringer, you imagine, is still standing in his small wooden cell, the place the older brothers call simply the candle room. You have been in there once, the year you arrived. It is a small stone box of a room with one window the size of a cupped hand, set high in the wall. There is a low stool. There is the candle on its iron stand. There is the bowl of water raised on a small wooden plinth, with the copper spout drip, drip, dripping into a basin below. There is nothing else. The bell ringer sits on the stool, and he watches the candle, and the candle watches him back. Once an hour, sometimes twice, he marks the time on a small piece of wood with a small piece of charcoal. It is a job that is given by tradition to a different brother each week. It is mostly given to the older men. Some of them say they prefer it. The night watch in the candle room is the closest a monk in your country gets to true solitude. Outside, in the cloister, in the dark, the cold has a kind of texture. It is not just an absence of heat. It is something on the skin. It is a thing you have to walk through, like wading slowly into shallow water. Your breath is visible in the air. You can almost feel the moisture in the air settling on your shaved scalp. Above, the stars are still out. You glance up. Orion has finished his nightly walk across the south and is leaning toward the west, ready to set. The hunter is going home. The plough is still high in the north. The night, you can tell from this alone, is still some hours from done. The brothers can read the season's sky as easily as you can read your own hand. It is, for an Irish monk, another way of telling time. Candle, water, stars. The single rushlight at the far end of the dormitory is the only flame. By its light, in a long quiet procession, you walk toward the door. The man in front of you walks with the slight stoop of a scribe, a man who has bent over vellum for 30 winters. The man behind you walks with the firm tread of someone who is not. You do not look at either of them. You walk. Why do you wake at this hour, in the deep, deep dark, when the world is still asleep? Because the day in your country is shaped by the Psalms. There are 150 Psalms in the Book of David. The rule of your house, the rule of every house in Ireland and the islands, says you must sing all 150 in the course of each week. Every week, for all the years of your life. The day is built around fitting them in. 8 offices, day and night. The night office, this one, sometimes called Vigils, sometimes Matins, is the longest. It is the night's heavy work. It carries the largest share of the Psalms, because the night is long, and the brothers, lying still in the cold, have nothing else to do but pray. You step out into the cloister. The cold here is sharper. The sky is enormous. A few last stars are still visible in the gap between the buildings. There is the smell that will follow you all day. Peat smoke from a hearth somewhere across the enclosure, where someone has banked the fire for the morning. Damp grass, cattle, on the far side of the wall, the river, the Shannon, beyond the cattle, moving its slow black weight past the island. You cross the cloister to the church. The church door is open. Yellow candlelight spills out onto the path. You step inside, and the small wooden bell, hung now from the hand of the bell ringer, falls silent, and you take your place in the choir. The singing begins. It is not loud. It is not joyful. It is the slow, considered chant of men who have done this every night for years, and will do this every night for years more. The candles flutter when someone exhales. The breath of the brothers rises in pale clouds into the cold roof. The night song moves through the room like a slow current of dark water. The psalms are sung not in any private order, but in the order set by the rule. Tonight the choir begins with Psalm 3, then Psalm 4, then Psalm 5, working through the early numbers in the long, quiet pre-dawn. A senior monk on your right has a voice that has gone with the years to a low and steady drone, not beautiful exactly, but as reliable as a river. A novice on your left has not yet learned how to keep his voice from cracking on the long-held notes. You can hear him almost holding his breath against the break. You yourself, 2 years in, sing in the comfortable middle of the line, not loud, not soft, just one of 40 men carrying the same slow weight. You stop noticing, after a while, where your own voice ends and the room's begins. The chant becomes a kind of thinking. The body keeps standing, the lungs keep filling. The mind, somewhere in the middle of the third psalm, drifts off and looks at the candles and comes back, drifts off and comes back. This is one of the small open secrets of monastic life. The long night office is not, for most of the brothers, a feat of fierce concentration. It is closer to a long communal breathing exercise. The mind goes where it goes, the chant continues, the night is held. You will, in your country, in your century, hear no other sound at this hour like it, and outside, beyond the stones, beyond the cattle, beyond the river, the world keeps not knowing that you are awake. There will be hours of this. The first office of the day is the longest. The world outside will keep being dark for a long time yet. The candle in the bell ringer's small room will continue to burn down, one slow ring at a time. The drip from the copper spout will continue, drop by drop, into its basin. The river will continue, and in this small lit-up room of singing men, the night will be slowly, slowly held back, psalm by psalm, until the first weak honey of the dawn at last finds the east window. And so as the first office settles into its long second hour, and the candle in the bell ringer's room burns down past another ring, the night holds, and the bell hangs still on its rope, waiting for the next time it must be pulled. The night office ends long before the dawn does. There is a strange in-between in the offices of the night. Vigils finishes, and there is a small pause, sometimes a few minutes, sometimes nearly an hour, before the bell calls you back for lauds, the office of the dawn. Some monasteries fill it with private reading, some fill it with sitting still. Yours fills it with a slow walk back to the dormitory and a kind of half-sleep on the rush mat. Eyes closed, robe still on, the body resting but not quite lying down. You hear very faintly the river. You hear very faintly a cow. Then the bell again, lighter this time, and you stand up. Lauds is sung as the first true light begins to enter the east window. It comes in the color of weak honey. It is the most beautiful office of the day, and the one that the older monks love best, because for a few minutes, while you sing, you watch the light find the cross at the front of the church and slowly, slowly climb it. The psalms of lauds are bright ones, psalms of waking, psalms that call on every kind of thing in the world to sing along. Sun and moon, mountains and hills, the young of the cattle, the birds of the air, you sing them with the slight crack in your voice that hours of silence and cold leave behind, and you watch the honey-colored light climb. Then lauds ends, and the rule of silence ends, and the day begins. After Louds, you walk to the Scriptorium. The Scriptorium is a long, low building at the edge of the enclosure, with a row of small windows along the south wall to catch the day's light. There is no hearth. There is in fact no fire allowed inside the Scriptorium at all, except for a single small lamp at night for the master scribe, and even that is mistrusted. Fire and vellum are mortal enemies. One spark and a winter's work, a gospel book worth more than a herd of cattle, would be gone. So the Scriptorium is cold. In winter the ink can freeze in its horn. In summer the room is sweet with the smell of beeswax and a faint metal tang from the iron in the ink. Today is somewhere between, damp, cool, smelling of stone and of vellum. There is in the air of this room a particular blend of smells that you will for the rest of your life recognize anywhere. Beeswax from the seal on the door, a faint sweet rot from the lime pits out behind the wall where the calf skins are soaking, the slightly metallic scent of the iron gall ink as it sits in its small horn cups, the dry powder smell of the chalk that scribes rub into the surface of the vellum to lift any oil from a finger, and underneath all of it, the deep, slow, ancient smell of dried animal skin, which is what every page is made of, and which never quite leaves the Scriptorium even on a hot day. You take a slow breath. The smell is to you the smell of the work. A novice is already there. He has been working since before Louds by candle. He has been cutting vellum. Here is the thing about vellum that no one outside a monastery quite understands, and it is what your day is about to be built on. Vellum is calf skin, not parchment from sheep. Vellum, properly speaking, from young calves. Each sheet of vellum was a calf. To make a single great gospel book, the Book of Kells, for example, which is being made even now, perhaps not far from here, perhaps on the island of Iona by brothers you may meet one day. To make one gospel book of that scale, you need the skins of roughly 185 calves, roughly 185 young animals, held, bled, skinned, limed, scraped, stretched, dried. The herd from which those calves were taken would have numbered well over 1,000 head. This is why your monastery keeps cattle. The cattle you heard before Louds on the far side of the wall, the cattle whose smell came to you on the cold air. They are not only food, they are not only milk and butter, they are also, in a quiet sense, a writing supply industry, a library on the hoof. Every gospel book in your country is, in some still walking form, also a herd. This is the strange double life of the cattle here. They are looked after by lay brothers, not full monks, but men of the surrounding country who have placed themselves under the monastery's protection and who live with their families in the small group of houses on the lay side of the wall. The brothers your monastery calls the menag. They tend the cattle and milk them and drive them between pastures and grieve in their own quiet way when one is taken for the lime pit. The calves that become the pages of a gospel book do not know they are about to become a book. The men who tend them know. The men who write the book also know. The animal does not. There is in this something the older brothers do not like to talk about, a small steady weight that they carry, the way a man carries a stone in his shoe and decides not to take it out. But the work goes on, and the calves keep being born, and the books keep being made, and the country keeps producing one of the most beautiful written objects in the world. It takes about 3 weeks to make a sheet of vellum from a calf. First, the skin is soaked in a lime pit for 10 days, until the hair lifts away. Then it is stretched on a wooden frame and scraped with a half-moon blade, the linellum, until the surface is smooth and even on both sides. Then it is allowed to dry in the air slowly. If it dries too fast, it warps. If it dries too slowly, it rots. A good vellum maker is a kind of priest of his own. The novice cutting the sheet at the bench this morning has spent 3 years learning to do nothing else. You take your place at your own desk. Your desk is a board, sloped, on a low frame, in a row of identical boards. You sit on a wooden stool with no back. Behind you, the cold of the stone wall presses through your robe. In front of you, the day's work waits, a small section of a Gospel of Mark you have been copying out for almost 2 months. The page in front of you is half written. The blank below it waits. The master scribe walks the row in silence. He stops at the desk of the man 2 places down from you and looks for a long moment at his work. He does not speak. The other monk does not look up. The master moves on. In the corner, the senior illuminator is working on what is called a carpet page, a full-page design of pure pattern, interlaced knotwork, where the lines of the design loop in and out of each other like the strands of 1,000 small braided ropes, and a real braid would unravel if you tried to pull on it. But these will not. They cannot. They were drawn by men who had spent half their lives studying the line that goes nowhere and returns. The senior illuminator has been on the current page for more than a year. He may finish it before he dies. He may not. There is no urgency. The book itself is a gift to God. God, your country thinks, has time. You watch him work for a moment, although the rule is that you should not. He is laying down one of the smallest details, a single dot, perfectly centered inside a curling tendril of red, and he is using a brush so fine that it looks, from where you sit, like a single hair. He bends close. He breathes out, slow and even. He lays the dot. He sits back and looks at it. He does not smile. He does not frown. He simply looks. Then he loads the brush again and moves to the next. It occurs to you watching him that the page he is making will outlast every person in this room. The cattle whose skin he is writing on are long dead. The brushes will wear out. The inks will run dry. The candles will be replaced. He himself will die, perhaps in this room. But the page will still be here, and someone, 1,000 years from now, will look at it and understand exactly nothing about him. Not his name, not the year, not the smell of the room, not the cold in his hands, and yet they will see the small red dot he laid down this morning. There is, you think, a strange peace in being part of something that will not be remembered. The dot will be remembered. The hand will not. The hand is happy enough with that. It is colder than you would like. Your fingers stiffen. You blow on them, then on the iron gall ink in its small horn, which is sluggish today, almost slow as honey. You pick up your quill, a grey goose feather cut and slit by your own hand last week, and your penknife. The little knife in your other hand has two uses. One, to keep the point of the quill sharp. Two, to scrape away mistakes. The vellum is so good a surface that a careful scribe with a careful knife can lift an error away without leaving more than a faint shadow. From this small everyday tool comes a small everyday word in the language you speak 1,000 years later, the word penknife. The little blade in your hand is, in a very straight line, the small folding tool in someone's drawer tonight. Before you begin, you do what every scribe in this house has done before beginning, every morning since long before you were born. You sit still. You set both hands flat on the cool board of the desk. You let your shoulders drop. You wait for your breath to settle into the rhythm of the room. The senior brothers say that the page knows. The page can tell, somehow, when a man comes to it tense, or angry, or in a hurry, and the page will not give itself to such a man. You doubt this, in the small part of your mind that doubts things, but you also do not doubt it, because the senior brothers are senior for a reason, and the pages they have written are visibly steadier than yours. So you sit, you breathe, you wait. Only when the breath is right do you reach for the quill. You begin to write, slowly. Your hand moves in the practiced shapes of insula minuscule. The ink is sluggish, but it takes. The vellum is hairy on this side, smooth on the other. You are working on the smooth. The hair side will be the next page. Outside the window, the dawn light has finished climbing. The day is now properly a day. Somewhere across the enclosure a cow lows. Somewhere the river keeps moving. The novice at the cutting bench keeps cutting. And so as the morning settles over the Scriptorium, and the first words of a gospel slowly arrive on a sheet that was once an animal, the work goes on, and the day goes on, and the world outside the small window goes on without you. After 2 hours at the desk, the bell sounds again, small and short, for Prime, the first of the day officers. You stand. You feel the stiffness in your back release in 2 small, unhappy clicks. You file out of the Scriptorium with the others, and into the church, and the third office of the day is sung. Prime is short and direct, a hinge between the silent work of dawn and the active work of the morning. It is the office of beginning. After Prime comes the chapter meeting in a small stone room off the cloister called the chapter house. The abbot, an old man with one ruined eye, reads aloud one chapter of the rule. Today's chapter is on the conduct of guests. You will think about this later. Then he assigns the day's work. 2 brothers to the herb garden, 3 to the cattle, 1 to mend the bell rope which is fraying, and you today to pigments. Pigments are made in a small lean-to attached to the back of the Scriptorium, where the smell will not bother the writing room, and the dangerous powders will not blow into open ink. You walk to it slowly. You are not in a hurry to grind pigment, but you are not unhappy to be assigned to it. The pigment shed is one of the strangest rooms in the monastery. It is full of stones, not stones from the ground exactly, stones that have travelled. On a low shelf along the back wall there are small lead-lined boxes. Each box holds a different colour. You know these boxes well. You also know, although it is not your business to know, but the colors here come from very different places. Some grow in the field outside, some are dug up out of the earth a day's walk away, some come from the sea or from creatures in the sea, and some, the rarer ones, come from distances that, when you think about them, make the world feel very large and your monastery feel very small. A box on this shelf may have been opened by a hand that was passed, mouth to mouth, hand to hand, river to river, ocean to ocean, until it ended in the hand of a man you will never meet, on a shore you will never see. Every box on this shelf, in a quiet sense, is a small letter from a stranger. There is a yellow-orange box, orpiment, a bright sun-colored powder that is, the older brothers tell you in low voices, a kind of slow poison. Orpiment is arsenic. Painters who use it too long lose first their teeth, then their wits. You are told to wash your hands before you touch your face. The pigment is too useful to give up. It gives the brightest yellow in Europe, and the carpet pages need it. So the brothers grind it carefully, and they wash, and they hope. There is a red box, red lead, and a darker, more precious red, made from a tiny insect that lives on a kind of oak. There is a green box, verdigris, copper turned green by vinegar. There is a black box, very full, soot and oak galls, and the iron salt that, when mixed with gum from the acacia tree, becomes iron gall ink, the same ink that is in your inkhorn back at the desk. The recipe is simple and old. Oak galls, those small hard balls that grow on oak twigs when a wasp lays her egg there, are crushed and soaked in water. Then iron sulfate is added. The liquid turns from clear to a dark, almost violet black. Then gum arabic, sap from a tree your country has never seen, that traveled across the sea in a small clay pot, to thicken it and bind it. This recipe, sitting on your shelf in the early 9th century, is so durable that 1,000 years from now, when men in white wigs sit in a hot Philadelphia room to sign the founding document of a new country across the ocean, they will be signing it in this same ink, mixed from this same recipe. The black on your page tonight and the black on their constitution are, in a real sense, the same black. And then, in the smallest box of all, there is the blue. The blue is what you were sent here to grind today. The senior illuminator wants more for his carpet page. He has been on the same page, you remember, for over a year, and the blue he uses for the smallest knots of interlace must be the right blue, deep even, not muddy, not greenish. So the abbot has assigned you, of all the work in the monastery, to the slow, careful labor of making more blue. The story you have been told about this blue is grand. Brother Cathal, the one who teaches the novices, likes to tell it on cold evenings. He says the blue comes from a stone called lapis lazuli, and that the stone is mined in a single valley in a country he has never seen, far to the east, beyond Byzantium, in a place called Afghanistan. He says the stone walks for years, hand to hand, ship to ship, mule to mule, over a route he cannot draw, until it arrives in a small leather purse on the coast of your country, and is sold ounce for ounce for a price he is too polite to say. He says the blue in the Gospels you write here is the same blue that walked 6,000 miles to be here. It is a beautiful story. It is also, you will eventually learn, although not from Brother Cathal, who will die believing it, not entirely true. It will take more than 1,000 years for someone to find out. The story will be passed down faithfully, generation after generation, monk to monk, scholar to scholar, museum guide to museum guide. The blue in the Book of Kells is from Afghanistan, they will say. It is the rarest pigment on earth. It is the proof of Irish monasticism's reach. The story will be in every guidebook and every documentary. And then, in the early years of the third millennium, in a quiet room in Trinity College in Dublin, a small piece of light from a machine called a Raman spectrometer will rest on a single blue letter and read its chemistry and report something else. Woad. The blue in the Book of Kells is woad, a plant, a small unimpressive plant that grew in the fields of your own country and in the fields of the Picts to the north. The same plant your distant ancestors were said by Roman writers to have painted their skin with before going into battle. The blue in the Gospel book that you, tonight, in your century, believe to have walked across the world from a stone in Afghanistan, is in fact a blue that grew in a field a few miles from here. Brother Cathal, on those same cold evenings, tells you other things about your country that he wants the novices to remember. He tells you, for instance, that your church has, until very recently, kept Easter on a different date from Rome. For nearly 200 years, the Irish Church calculated the movable feast by an older 84-year cycle, while the Roman Church used a newer 19-year cycle taken from the calculations of the Church of Alexandria. The two methods could, in a given spring, place Easter as much as a month apart. In a kingdom on the other side of the sea, the kingdom of Northumbria in the northern part of what later ages will call England, a king once finished his Easter feast while his own queen, faithful to the Irish calculation, was still in the silent fast of Palm Sunday in the same hall. The brothers in your house, who are old enough to remember, still speak of the great meeting at a place called Whitby in the year 664, when the Roman calculation finally prevailed in Northumbria. Iona, the mother house of half your country, did not conform until 2 generations later. Brother Cathal does not say so directly, but you understand there have been for most of living memory 2 Christianities under the same sky. One of the things the men at Whitby argued about, besides Easter, was the shape of a man's head. The Irish brothers, your brothers, the brothers in this room, wear what your country calls the tonsure of St. John. The hair is shaved from ear to ear across the front of the head, and what remains hangs long at the back. The Roman tonsure, the one the men at Whitby wanted everyone to wear, is the corona, the small round shaved circle on the crown of the head with a ring of hair around it like the crown of thorns. Both sides used the word tonsure. Both meant something quite different. The Roman side, in the heat of the argument, called the Irish tonsure by an unkind name, the tonsure of Simon Magus, they said, after the magician in the Acts of the Apostles who tried to buy the power of the Spirit. Your own brothers, when they hear this name, do not answer it. They simply lift one hand quietly and touch the small bare line across the front of their own scalp. You touch yours now in the small lit-lined air of the pigment shed while you wait for the pestle to be ready. The line is still there. The line will, in a few decades more, begin to disappear. The Roman tonsure will, in the end, win, but it has not won yet, and the small bare strip across the front of your head is one of the small last marks of an older, stranger, more independent Irish church. No one will be disappointed in the end. It is in some ways a better story. The Irish blue, the brothers will turn out to be saying, was always Irish. The plant the warriors painted themselves with before going into the long grass, the same plant, the fields outside the wall and the carpet pages of the great books, in the end sharing one color, one chemistry, one slow blue ancestor. The monks who pressed it from the leaves did not know they were doing something more local than the story they told themselves. They thought they were reaching across the world. They were, in fact, reaching across the field. Both in their own way are journeys worth making, but you do not know any of this. You scoop a small measure of the precious powder, which you have been told is from Afghanistan, and which you handle as if it were, into a small stone mortar. You begin to grind. The room smells of mineral and of the slow, careful patience of grinding. The pestle moves in slow circles, weight following weight, the small soft sound of stone on stone. The light through the small high window is the color of weak grey gold. Somewhere on the other side of the wall a cow lows. Somewhere a bell, not yours, a far bell, maybe from a daughter house downriver, sounds and stops. The pestle is heavy. It is shaped like a small smooth pear, made of the same hard stone as the mortar, polished by generations of hands until the grip is dark with use. Your grandfather's grandfather, if he had been a monk, could have used this same pestle. The shape of the work has not changed in any way anyone can remember. You grind, you stop, you inspect the powder, you grind again. The blue under the small repeated weight of stone on stone slowly becomes finer than flour. The senior illuminator wants it fine enough that it will not catch in the brush, so fine that when you tip it out onto a small slip of vellum it lies flat, like the shadow of a color rather than the color itself. While you grind, you let your mind drift back to the story Brother Cathal told. You think about the journey of the stone, wherever the stone is actually from. You imagine a man somewhere far to the east, in a country you will never see, walking down out of a high pale mountain pass with a small leather sack tied at his belt. You imagine the sack being handed to another man at a river crossing. You imagine it carried by a boat down a river you do not know the name of, and then loaded onto a camel. You have heard of camels. The older monks have described them. You do not quite believe the description, and then exchanged in a market for silver, and then exchanged again and again, until at last it arrives at the coast of your own country, and is rowed up the Shannon, and is handed in a small dim room to your abbot, and is locked into a small lead-lined box on a shelf in a pigment shed. Whether the actual stone in your mortar travelled that road or only seems to have, the imagining of the road is part of the labour. The story is part of the colour. The story will continue to be part of the color for over 1,000 years, until a small machine in a quiet college room reads the chemistry and rewrites the story, and even then the story will simply gain a new chapter. The blue will still be the blue, the work will still be the work, and the slow circular motion of stone on stone in a small Irish room in the early 9th century will still somehow be what made the page possible. And as the pigment grows finer under your hand and the morning slowly turns toward midday, the work goes on and the day goes on, and the great quiet machine of the monastery keeps moving, one slow circle at a time. The bell for terce comes more lightly than the bells of the night. It is a small daytime sound, almost cheerful, the kind of bell that is not waking anyone, only marking a turn in the work. You set down your pestle. The blue powder, fine as the shadow of a color, is left in its mortar for the senior illuminator to come and collect. You wash your hands twice in the small clay basin by the door, because the older brothers always warn you not to carry pigment back into the church on your skin. Then you walk with the others to Prime's small cousin office. Terce is short, the 3rd hour of the day. 3 psalms, a brief hymn, a reading no longer than a long breath. You stand, you sing, you step out into the cloister again, and now the morning is fully open. The dew has burned off the grass. The sky over the river is a pale Atlantic grey-blue, with the slow ragged white of clouds moving east. The honey light of Lards is gone. The daylight is now its plain working self. After terce the chapter assignments shift. The scribes who can be spared from the desk are sent out to other work. You are one of them. The abbot, who keeps a small wooden tablet of who has done what, has decided that you have ground enough blue for one morning, and that your back, which he has noticed is too straight for a man of your age, needs the slope of a different labor. He tells you very briefly to go to the mill. You cross the enclosure, and this is the part of the day every day when the strangeness of where you live first comes back to you, because what you cross on your way to the mill is not a monastery, not in the way the word will mean 1,000 years from now, when men in cities will picture a small stone chapel in the woods with a handful of bowed brothers in black robes. What you cross is a town, not a city exactly, not as the Roman world meant a city, but a town all the same. There are perhaps 700 or 800 souls inside the wall of your enclosure today, and perhaps as many again in the small houses just outside it, on the lay side of the wall. Most of them are not monks. The brothers in black robes, the scribes, the priests, the singers in the choir, are in fact the smallest part of the population. Around them lives an entire community, lay tenants called in your own language Menaig, who farm the monastery's land and pay their rent in butter and grain and labor, carpenters, metal workers, stone cutters who carve the high crosses, reed cutters for the rush mats, tanners, cattle herds, brewers, cooks, the families of all of these, and a small number of full-time poor, fed at the gate every morning. A monastery of this size, in your country, in your century, has its own mill, its own brew house, its own smithy, its own dairy, its own fishery, and its own small harbor where the long courage boats come up the Shannon. It mints, sometimes its own coin. It judges, sometimes its own quarrels. It is in every practical sense that a later age will mean the word, a town that happens to be built around a church. The brothers are the minority within their own walls. The town is everyone else. You walk past the smithy first. The door is open. You can see, even at this distance, the small red eye of the forge inside. The smith is one of the oldest men on the enclosure, a small bald man with arms like the roots of an old tree. There is a saying in your country, the brothers have told you this saying since you were a novice, that the smith and the scribe stand on the same step, two men who shape lasting things. The scribe gives the word a body of ink, the smith gives the bell a body of iron. The kings respect them both, the poets sing about them both. In some old legal tracts kept in the monastery library, the smith is listed in the same rank as the harper and the historian. You have never said this to the smith, who would only laugh, but you have thought it every time you pass his door. A hammer falls inside, one slow ring of iron on iron, then another. He is forging something small today, perhaps a hinge, perhaps a knife. The sound travels across the enclosure in a way no other sound does. It is unlike the bell, unlike the chant, unlike the river. It is the sound of a single man shaping a single piece of the world. You pass the brew house next. The door is closed, but the smell comes out around it in a slow warm cloud. Wet grain, sweet malt, a faint bitterness from the herbs the brewers add to the second batch of the season. Beer is brewed here every week. Beer is poured here every day. Every man on the enclosure, from the abbot to the youngest novice, drinks beer with his meals, not because they like the taste, although many of them do, but because the water in your country, in your century, cannot, without exception, be trusted. The river is the mother of the monastery, and the river also carries the sewage of the cattle and the leavings of every village upstream. The brewers boil their water in long copper pans before they ferment it. The boiling by accident more than by knowledge kills what is in it. The fermentation by accident more than by knowledge preserves what is left. The small weak beer that comes out of the brew house is one of the safest things any of you will drink all year. In the older stories, the ones the senior brothers tell at the long winter meals, it was Bridget of Kildare, the great founder mother, who taught the brewers their craft. She is said in one tale to have turned the bath water of a leper into beer for a house full of guests, and the guests, the story goes, did not complain. The story is told with a small laugh. The brewers, when they tell it, pretend they had nothing to do with it. You cross the small wooden bridge over the mill stream and come to the mill. The mill is the proudest building on the enclosure after the church. It is a low rectangular building of stone and oak, sitting astride a small race that has been cut from the river. Water comes in from upstream, drops a short distance, strikes the wheel, and runs out again to rejoin the Shannon a few yards lower down. The wheel is horizontal, flat, like a wide stone disc lying on its side underwater, not the tall vertical wheel you might one day see on a windmill or a later watermill. The horizontal wheel turns about a vertical shaft, and the shaft rises through a hole in the floor of the mill above, and the shaft turns the upper millstone, and the upper millstone turns against the lower, and the grain pours between, and the flour falls. This kind of mill you will eventually learn, although you do not know it now, is the oldest of its kind in this part of the world. Centuries before you were born, downstream on the southern coast of your own country, at a place called Little Island near the mouth of the river they will one day call the Lee, two such mills were built side by side, driven by the tide, with 2 wheels and 2 pairs of stones. The timbers of those mills are still in the ground there, soaked, slow, almost stone themselves. 1,000 years from now, men will dig them up and read the rings of the oak and announce, with mild surprise, that the mill you are about to step into is the descendant of the oldest tide-driven mill found anywhere in Europe or in Asia. The earliest known machinery in this corner of the world is, it turns out, an Irish mill. The grain you grind today is being ground on a design your country has been using since before the Vikings even had a word for Ireland. But for now, the mill is simply the mill. You step inside. The noise here is unlike the noise anywhere else on the enclosure. Not the bell, not the chant, not the hammer. The mill clacks, wood against stone against wood, a slow regular knocking, like a heart inside a chest. Only the chest is the whole building. The grain in the hopper above the stones whispers as it slides down. The water below, under the floor, rushes its endless one-syllable word. The miller, a heavy lay brother with white dust in his eyelashes, nods at you and does not speak. He points with his chin to the sacks of unground oats stacked along the wall. He points to the small wooden scoop. You understand. You take off your robe cloak, hang it on a peg, take up the scoop, and begin to feed the hopper. For the next hour you do this small, simple work. You scoop, you tip, you wait, you scoop again. The mill clacks, the grain whispers, the water rushes. Your arms grow tired in the way arms grow tired only when a body that usually sits has been asked to stand. The miller in the corner, with the slow patience of a man who has fed this same hopper every working day for 30 years, watches you and does not correct you. You are doing it right enough. The grain knows where to go. A little before the bell for sext, the miller stops the wheel by closing a small wooden sluice gate at the head of the race. The water turns aside and runs straight to the river. The wheel slows. The clack slows. Then it is silent. He nods at you again. He takes a small wooden mug down from a shelf and dips it into a clay jug, beer from the brew house, and hands it to you. You drink. It is weak and warm and faintly sour. It is the first thing you have drunk all day. You wipe your mouth with the back of your wrist, the way the lay brothers do, and you set the mug back on the shelf. Outside, the cattle have wandered closer to the wall in your absence. You can smell them, the smell of cattle and of peat smoke from the kitchen chimney, the 2 smells that by the end of any day on this enclosure have settled into every fold of your robe. Somewhere, behind the brew house, a man is splitting wood. Somewhere closer, behind you, the river is still moving, and so as the mill stands quiet for its midday hour, and the smith's hammer falls one more slow time inside its open door, and the smell of cattle and peat smoke drifts across the enclosure on a slow Atlantic breeze, the day turns toward its single shared meal, and the bell for sext begins, very softly to be lifted from its rope. Sext is the office of the 6th hour, which means in your country, in your century, the office of noon, or what your century calls noon, which is what a much later century will call something nearer to 3 in the afternoon. The bell, very soft, calls you back from the mill. You set the scoop down. The miller closes the sluice gate completely now. The wheel is fully still. The clack that has been the background to your morning fades into the low, constant rush of the water and is gone. You step out into the daylight. The sun, when you find it, is low for noon. Your country lies far enough north that even the highest sun of a summer day stands at a slope, and it slants warmly through a gap in the clouds and catches the wet stones of the mill race. You feel for one small unprompted moment that the day is beautiful. You do not stop walking. You let the feeling pass through you. The senior brothers say it is good to notice such moments without holding on to them. You notice it, you let it go. The walk to the refectory is the busiest walk of the morning, because every man and every woman on the enclosure who is going to eat the midday meal is at this moment walking in the same direction. The cattle herders are coming in from the field with their wooden shoes muddy at the soles. The lay brothers from the mill walk a few paces behind you. The kitchen brothers, who have been at their work since before dawn, have already gone in. The novices, in their newer, paler robes, file along the south path. Children, yes, there are children on the enclosure. The children of the Manaig families run between the legs of the adults and are quietly herded back into line. The monastery at noon looks more than ever like a town, but at the door of the refectory, the town stops. The lay brothers and the families bear left to their own dining hall, a longer, lower building where the rules of silence are looser and a child can be allowed to laugh. The monks bear right toward the brothers' refectory. You go right. At the threshold of the refectory you bow your head once to the small wooden cross set into the lintel. You step inside. The room is long and low, with a single high table at the far end where the abbot sits, and two long parallel tables down the length of the room for everyone else. There are simple wooden benches. There is, along the south wall, a row of small high windows that let in pale daylight and almost no warmth. There is a smell of warm porridge and of something baked, and underneath, the persistent old smell of the wood of the tables, pine, polished by elbows for 50 years. At the far end, above the abbot's seat, there is a small raised platform with a wooden stand on it. This is the reader's pulpit. A young monk you know slightly, a brother of about your own age, named for one of the early saints, is already standing there, the heavy book open in front of him. The book is not a gospel. The gospel is too holy to read at meals. The book is today a copy of the life of Saint Anthony of Egypt, the desert father whose example helped begin all monastic life. The reader will read aloud, slowly and clearly, for the entire length of the meal. The brothers will listen while they eat. No one else will speak. This is the first rule of the refectory. The mouth that takes in food does not also let out words. The mouth that lets out words is the reader's, and his hands are folded on the book, not on a plate. The reader does not eat with the others. He eats after, alone, in the kitchen, a separate small meal kept warm for him on the hearth. The abbot enters last. Everyone stands. He says the grace in a low voice that does not carry to the back of the room, but you know the words by heart. He sits. Everyone sits. The reader begins. In those days there was a man in Egypt named Anthony, born of noble parents, who from his youth despised the things of the world. The bowls are past, and here, around the act of eating in silence, your country has built one of its small inventions. The brothers cannot ask aloud for bread. They cannot ask aloud for the salt. They cannot ask the brother at the end of the bench to slide the dish of pickled beans a little closer. But they need bread and salt and pickled beans, and so slowly over generations, not anyone's plan in particular, just the slow grinding of a need, the brothers have learned a small private vocabulary of the hands. 2 fingers laid flat against the upper lip means bread. The first 3 fingers brought to the mouth in a small lifting motion means I would like more. The thumb on the lower lip, tilted as if pouring, means drink. A small cross drawn in the air over a dish means this is the last of it. Please pass it down. These gestures are not in your century written down. No one has yet thought to make a list of them. They are passed, novice to novice, by being watched. But the practice of them, the slow, patient invention of an entire small silent language at a dinner table over generations, is one of the earliest structured systems of silent communication anywhere in Europe. The brothers in this room do not, of course, think of it as such. They think of it simply as how one asks for the salt. But long after the brothers are gone, scholars in distant universities will look back at the monastic refectories of the early Christian West and recognize in these small hand shapes one of the small quiet beginnings of every codified silent vocabulary that will follow, from the gestures of later monastic houses to the modern sign languages of the deaf. A novice arriving at the monastery for the first time sits at his bench, watches the men around him, and learns within a week what is required. Centuries from now, far across the sea in a great Burgundian house called Cluny, a monk named Bernard will sit down with a quill and write out the entire vocabulary of these signs, perhaps 300 of them by then, and his list will be the oldest surviving record of a monastic sign language anywhere in the world. But that list is not yet written, and the man who will write it has not yet been born. For now, in your refectory, in your country, the language exists only in the air between the hands of the brothers, and dies again when the meal ends. You eat slowly. The food today is plain and good. There is a small wooden bowl of oat porridge, cooked overnight in a long iron pot on the kitchen hearth, with a hot pat of butter slowly disappearing into its center. There is a slice of bread on a square of linen beside the bowl. The bread is yesterday's. Every loaf served in the refectory is the loaf of the day before, and not the loaf of today. This is not because the brothers cannot bake fresh bread. They bake fresh every morning. It is because the brothers have decided somewhere far back in their tradition that fresh warm bread is a small pleasure that may in a long quiet life become a small expectation, and a small expectation, the rule says, is the beginning of a large appetite, and a large appetite is the beginning of a great deal of trouble. So the loaves cool for a day on a shelf in the kitchen before they reach the tables. The bread you eat today was baked while you were still in last night's vigils. The bread you bake today will be eaten while you are in tomorrow's. Beside the bread there is a small piece of soft cheese, made on the enclosure from your own cows, and 3 or 4 pickled beans from a clay jar. Twice a week, sometimes 3 times, there is fish from the weir in the river, smoked or salted. On rare days, feast days, or when a guest of importance has come, there is mutton, there is no beef. The cattle are too valuable, alive, in milk and in calf, to be slaughtered for food without need. The diet that the later world will think of as severe, a monk's diet, is on the page of any visiting doctor of your century, surprisingly varied: oats, bread, cheese, butter, fish, beans, root vegetables, sometimes mutton, in season the small green things from the herb garden. The fast days, and there are many, remove fish and dairy too, and then the meal is plain porridge and bread and water, and one is hungry by Vespers. But today is not a fast day. Today is an ordinary day. Today the butter is in the porridge and the cheese is on the bread. You eat, the reader reads. And Anthony, hearing the gospel read in the church, that he should sell what he had and give to the poor, departed to the desert. At the bench across from you, an older brother lifts 2 fingers to his lip and looks down the table. A novice 4 seats down, quietly slides the bread platter along, hand to hand, until it reaches him. He takes 1 slice, lays it on his linen, and the platter returns. Not a word. The reader reads on. A small smile passes between 2 of the senior brothers near the high table, the smile of men who have done this together for 30 years, and have between them more memory of this room than of any room they were born in. The smile does not reach their mouths. It happens almost entirely in their eyes. The youngest novice at the far end of the bench catches the corner of it, does not understand it, and looks back down at his porridge. He will, in 20 years, exchange the same small smile with a brother of his own, across this same table, for the same kind of unspoken reason. The room teaches it slowly. The room teaches everything slowly. When the bowls are empty and the linen is folded, the abbot stands. The reader closes the book. The brothers stand. The grace after meals is said. Then, in the same long quiet file in which you came in, you walk out. The refectory empties row by row. You step into the cloister again, and the noon light, and the small private feeling of a body that has been fed. There is a small period now, perhaps the length of a slow chant, when the brothers may walk in the cloister and very quietly speak to one another about necessary things. A scribe may consult the senior illuminator about a difficult passage. A herd brother may ask whether the lame cow should be brought in. You stand by the small stone bench under the south wall, where the sun, when it is out, sometimes warms the stones enough to be felt through the robe. The smell of cattle and peat smoke is still on you, and now mixed into it the faint clean smell of oat porridge and of warm butter. The motifs are stacking, one over the other, in the cloth of your robe, and so as the bell for none waits, unstruck, on its rope, and the abbot retires to his small room for the half-hour he allows himself between offices, and the reader carries his cold dinner from the kitchen out to the bench by the door, the day moves quietly forward into its long warm middle, and the herb garden, which is where you will go next, begins in its hidden way to be ready for you. The bell for none sounds at the 9th hour, which in your country, in your century, falls in the warm middle of the afternoon. You walk back into the church one more time. The light through the south windows is heavy and slow. The choir is half full. The older brothers, who have eaten more than they should at the noon meal, stand and sing with the slightly drowsy weight that comes over anybody that has been fed and is now being asked to praise. The office is short. The psalms are sung. The benediction is spoken. The brothers file out again. Somewhere in the centuries to come, the 9th hour will keep drifting earlier and earlier in the day, pulled by the appetite of monks who want their meal sooner, until the word for the 9th hour, noon, comes to rest at midday. But that is for the long, slow future. For now, none still means 3. 3 still means the deep afternoon. The clock face of the world has not yet been rearranged. After none, the assignments change once more. The men who worked in the field this morning go back to it for the warmest hours. The scribes return to their boards. You today are sent to the herb garden, because the brother who tends it, the infirmarian, has asked a chapter for a pair of younger hands. The infirmarian is a quiet man named, in your house, simply by his office, the man of the sick. He is in his 50s, gentle, with hands that look like they were made for the work, long fingers, broad calm palms, never in a hurry. He has tended every dying brother in this monastery for the last 20 years. He has also tended sick children from the Manaig families and travelers who arrived too ill to walk, and once, the year before you arrived, a king's messenger who collapsed at the gate from a riding fever and who lived because the infirmarian sat by him for 3 nights. You like the infirmarian. He smells always of the small mixed garden, rosemary, mint, yarrow, a faint medicinal sweetness underneath it all. You find him in the garden, on his knees, with a small basket already half full of cut yarrow stems. The herb garden of an Irish monastery is not a wild thing. It is laid out in small square beds bordered with low stones, 4 beds by 4, like the squares of a board, with narrow paths of crushed shell between them. Each bed holds 1 plant, or where 2 plants share a habit, 2. The infirmarian knows every bed by name, and the name of every plant in each bed, in 3 languages, in Irish for himself and the lay brothers, in Latin for the books, and sometimes in Greek for the words that come down to him from the older medical writings copied into the library across the cloister. This is not, in your country, an unusual sight. The Irish monasteries, yours among them, have over the past 200 years quietly become the chief keepers of a knowledge that much of the rest of Europe has begun, in places, to forget. The works of the old Greek physicians, Hippocrates, Galen, the books on plants and on the 4 humours, exist in your library, copied painstakingly from older copies, in Latin, sometimes with marginal notes in Irish. The infirmarian has read them. He has read them more than once. He treats his patients with what is on his shelf, and what is on his shelf is partly his own country's wisdom, the small green plants of the wet Irish fields, and partly a thin, steady thread of inheritance from a warm, dry country a long way to the east. where men in white robes once argued in olive groves about whether all illness comes from black bile or yellow bile, or simply from too much sleep. The thread did not break. Irish hands kept it from breaking. The thread will, in time, be picked up again by hands in Francia and Italy, and through them eventually by hands in cities not yet built. But for now, the thread runs, very quietly, through your monastery's library, and out into this small ordered garden, and into the long calm fingers of the man kneeling in front of you. He sets you to work on the yarrow. Yarrow, the small white flowered plant the women of the Mannaic families also keep, dried in bunches in the rafters of their houses, has been gathered this morning. The infirmarian wants you to strip the small lower leaves from the stems, tie the stems in bunches of 7, and hang the bunches from a string he has run along the inside wall of the small drying shed beside the garden. The leaves you strip you place in a clean linen cloth on the bench. The leaves will be used dried in poultices for cuts that will not stop bleeding. The flowers hung in the bunches will be steeped in water through the winter and given to brothers with fevers. The yarrow is a small plant. It does a great deal. You kneel on the path opposite him. You begin. The work is slow and gentle. A small bee comes by, mistakes you for a flower, decides you are not, and goes on. The shell path is warm under your knees. The infirmarian works in silence for the first few minutes, and then, because the rule of silence is more relaxed in the gardens, and because he is the sort of man who teaches by quiet talk, he begins to name things. That bed there, he says, with the small grey-green leaves, is sage, for coughs in the throat, for the smell, also in the soap. That one with the long thin leaves, rosemary, for the head when it aches, for the meat, also, when the cooks are allowed. That one, mint, for the stomach, after too much beer, also for keeping the flies off the dead in summer. He says the last in the same calm voice as the others. You do not flinch. You have, in 2 years, learned not to. He points to a 4th bed, smaller than the others. That, he says, is willow, not the tree. The tree is by the river. This is a cutting from the tree, kept low for the bark. We strip the bark in early spring. We dry it. We grind it. We give a small measure of the powder to brothers who burn with fever, and the fever, sometimes within an hour, begins to come down. He does not know why. The Greeks did not know why. 1,000 years from now, men in coats in a German laboratory will isolate, from this same plant, a small white crystal they will call salicylic acid, and from that crystal they will make a small tablet that in your future world will sit in the cabinet of every household, and be called by the name of a flower, aspirin, named for the meadowsweet plant that contains the same molecule. The small thing the infirmarian is doing here today, in this small Irish garden, will, in a long, unbroken line of small hands, become the most widely taken medicine in human history. The infirmarian does not know this. You do not know this. The willow bed simply sits in the afternoon sun, with its small narrow leaves, in front of you both. He moves on. Yarrow again, for blood. Comfrey, for broken bones. Honey, And here he points not to a bed, but to a small wooden hive at the far corner of the garden, where bees come and go in a slow, loud thread, honey for wounds, spread on a clean linen, laid over a cut. The honey draws the badness out and keeps the place clean while the body works underneath. The older brothers say it is a small miracle of God. The infirmarian, who has watched too many wounds for too many years, says more quietly that he is not so sure where the line is between a miracle of God and a useful property of a useful substance, and that in his experience both are usually present. He points finally to a low patch by the wall where a deep green moss has been encouraged to grow. The moss is harvested in autumn, dried lightly, used to pack wounds and to soak up blood. It holds many times its weight in liquid and, the infirmarian says, seems to keep what it holds from going bad. A man can lose a foot in this country in a way only a country with bogs and axes can manage, and the moss, packed gently into the wound, can be the difference between losing only the foot and losing also the leg and the man and the family. He has, he says calmly, packed many such wounds. He thinks on balance, the moss has saved more lives than his prayers, although he prays each time he packs it. You look at him. He is still pulling small lower leaves from yarrow stems. He does not look up. He does not seem to think he has said anything unusual. It occurs to you that the infirmarian carries his knowledge the way another man might carry a heavy bucket, not with pride, not with apology, simply with the steady balance of someone who has learned how it sits in the hand. He learned most of what he knows from his predecessor, an old monk who died the year you arrived. That man in turn had learned from the one before him, who had walked here as a young man from a daughter house in the north, and had brought with him a small leather satchel of notes, copied in his own hand, from the books of an even older brother long since gone. The infirmarian's whole craft is a small chain of hands. He sometimes says, with a small smile that does reach his mouth, that the chain is what saves people. The chain is what God lets the brothers be, the long quiet rope that lowers the past into the present and keeps the sick from drowning. The afternoon goes on, the shadows shift. The bee comes back, tries you again, leaves. You strip leaves, he strips leaves. The pile in the linen cloth grows. The bunches in the drying shed lengthen along their string. Somewhere on the far side of the wall, the cattle are being moved between pastures, and a lay brother is calling to them in a low rising voice that is not quite singing. Somewhere further, the river continues, as it always continues. The smell of the herb garden, rosemary, mint, yarrow drying, the warm shell paths, the faint old wood of the drying shed door settles slowly into your robe. It joins the smell of peat smoke and of cattle and of warm butter that is already there. The afternoon is laying down its layers, and so as the small wooden hive hums at the corner of the garden, and the infirmarian rises slowly from his knees with the small careful breath of a man who has been kneeling a long time, and the bunches of yarrow on their string move very slightly in a breath of air that has come in across the river. The day eases gently toward its later half, and the road outside the gate, somewhere over the hill, begins to bring its slow afternoon traveler closer to the door. The yarrow bunches are hung. The infirmarian thanks you in his quiet way and releases you for the rest of the afternoon. You walk back through the cloister with the soft smell of the herb garden still on your hands. The afternoon light is now plainly past its highest. The shadows of the high crosses outside the church lean a little further east than they did at noon. You are, by the rule, free for the next hour. Free here does not mean idle. It means you may choose which of the small permitted tasks to do. You may return to the scriptorium and copy. You may help in the kitchen with the early preparations for the evening meal. You may sit in the church and pray, or you may climb to one of the small upper rooms above the scriptorium and read. You choose the upper room. There is a wooden ladder propped against the wall of the south side of the scriptorium that leads up through a small square hole in the floor of an attic-like space the brothers call simply the upper room. It is used for storage, mostly old codices that are no longer in regular use, broken candle stands, a few dusty wooden chests. But it has one good window facing west, and from that window, on a clear afternoon, you can see down the slope of the enclosure, over the gate, and out along the dirt road that runs from the monastery toward the next ford of the river. You like to sit there. You take an old book of homilies, one you have read 3 times, and you climb the ladder. The upper room is warm with the day's accumulated sun. The floor is wide oak boards. You sit by the window. You open the book on your knees. You do not read. Instead, you watch the road. This is, you have come to understand, one of the small private pleasures the rule does not quite forbid, to sit at this window and watch the road. The road is rarely empty for long. Today, in the still warmth of the late afternoon, you can see perhaps a half-mile out a single small figure walking. He has a staff. He has a pack on his back. He is not in a hurry. He has the slow, even walk of a man who has been walking for many days and intends to be walking for many more. A pilgrim, almost certainly. The monastery is on one of the main pilgrim roads of the country. Men and women come here on foot from as far as the northern coast, and from as far as the lakes in the west. They come because the soil of this enclosure is held to be holy ground. Kings pay to be buried here. The brothers' prayers are said to lift souls a little further on their long journey. The small bells of the church are said to carry across the river to the other world. Some of the pilgrims stay a day, some stay a week, some stay forever and become brothers or sisters in one of the daughter houses across the wall. The road in your country is full of slow walkers like the one approaching now, and this is one of the things you realize sitting at the window that makes your monastery what it is. It is not only a town, it is a node on a network of roads. The network goes much further than your country. In the past 100 years and more, monks from houses like yours, sometimes from this very house, have walked east, across the sea, and then on foot, through the kingdoms of the Franks, into the mountains the Romans once called the Alps, and beyond. They have founded monasteries as they went, the way a man scatters seeds while walking. Bobbio in the foothills of northern Italy was founded by an Irish brother named Columbanus, who never came home. Saint Gallen in what will one day be Switzerland is named for one of his companions, Gallus, who likewise never returned. Luxew and Annagray in Gaul are Irish foundations. There are libraries in cities you will never see, long stone rooms full of careful upright codices that were begun by men who walked out of doors not unlike the one at the bottom of your slope. In your own century, in the courts of the kings on the continent, Irish brothers are sought after as teachers. The great king of the Franks, a tall hard man named Charles, whom later ages will call Charlemagne, has in the past few decades deliberately gathered Irish scholars into his palace school, men with names like Sedulius and Dungal and the famous John Scotus, who will arrive at the Frankish court in your own lifetime. They teach grammar, they teach computus, the careful reckoning of the church's calendar. They argue Greek philosophy with bishops who can only read it because Irish hands once copied it for them. The Frankish kings have a small standing joke that any boat coming in from the western sea carries either a barrel of wine or an Irish scholar, and that the Irish scholar is harder to refuse. The brothers in your library, when this joke is told to them, allow themselves a small smile. You are, in other words, sitting in one corner of a quiet web that spreads from this damp Atlantic island all the way to the foothills of Italy and the river palaces of the Franks. You will almost certainly never see most of it, but it exists, and you are in it. And the small road at the bottom of your slope is in a real sense the same road. The pilgrim is closer now. You can see his cloak, dark with the road, and the way he leans on his staff at the small rise just before the gate. He stops there, takes off his hat, wipes his brow with the back of his wrist, and goes on. You look, as you sometimes do, at the empty corner of the enclosure where the older brothers have been saying for years a new building will eventually stand. The corner is by the church, on the high ground just inside the wall. The plans have been drawn, the stone has been quarried, the abbot has spoken about it at chapter meeting more than once. The building, when it comes, perhaps not in your lifetime, perhaps in your lifetime, no one is sure, will be a tower, a tall round stone tower, 15 or 20 times the height of a man, the way the Italian campanars are said to be, only narrower and Irish in its proportions. It will hold the great bell, the one that does not yet exist either, but that the smith and the abbot have been talking about. It will hold also, in its upper chamber, the most precious books of the library and the gold-bound reliquaries on a small wooden shelf reached only by ladder, and, although the brothers say this part more quietly, the door of the tower, when it comes, will be set high above the ground, 4 times the height of a man, perhaps, reached by a ladder that can be pulled up, not because it is convenient, because in the last few decades news has begun to drift down from the north and the east. Longboats, strange longboats from across the sea, with carved prows like animal heads. They have struck Iona, they have struck Lindisfarne in Northumbria, they have struck Rathlin and Inishmurray on the coast of your own country. They have not yet come up the Shannon, but they will. Everyone in the abbot's chapter house knows they will. The tower, when it is built, will be a refuge as much as a bell stand. The door will be high enough that a man with an axe cannot easily reach it. The most precious books of your library, the Gospels, the calfskin pages from the herd outside the wall, will be carried up the ladder, and the ladder will be pulled up after them, and the brothers will sit in the upper chamber with their pages and wait. The towers your country will be famous for in 1,000 years are not yet built. They are still ideas in the quiet corners of abbots' rooms, but the ideas are forming slowly around the small dark image of a sail. Do not let your mind dwell there. Not today. Today the road still brings only one slow tired man on foot, and the longboats are still a faint rumor from far away. You hear faintly the gate bell ring. The pilgrim has arrived. In your country, in your century, a stranger at the gate is not, as he might be in some other places, a problem. He is a guest. He is, the rule says with great seriousness, Christ in another set of clothes. Every monastery has a guest house, a low building near the gate, with a stone hearth, a row of simple beds, and a single brother whose only office is to welcome whoever arrives, ill or well, rich or poor, kin or foreign. The guest master is one of the most important offices on the enclosure. He answers, in a real sense, for the soul of the house. If a hungry man is turned away here, the brothers believe the house has failed God, no matter how many psalms were sung that day. So the gate brother takes the pilgrim's pack from him, sits him on a bench, brings him a wooden cup of small beer, brings him a piece of yesterday's bread, and waits for him to gather himself before asking even his name. You will be involved later. The guest master has the help of 2 or 3 rotating brothers, and tonight after Vespers it will be your turn. You will help the gate brother carry warm water to the small bench where the pilgrim sits. You will kneel. You will with your own hands wash his feet. This is not unusual. It is what is done. Christ, the rule says, washed the feet of his own disciples. The brothers wash the feet of whoever comes. The gesture is called by an old word, mandatum, and it is one of the oldest things any house in your country does. The water will be warm. The cloth will be rough. The pilgrim will probably be embarrassed at first, and then quiet, and then, by the time you dry the second foot, something in him will have eased. You have seen it before. The feet are a small, unguarded place. To wash them is to say, in a way no language quite says, you are safe here. You close the book on your knees that you have not read. You stand. The light through the west window has shifted again. The shadows of the small wooden chests in the room are longer, and so as the gate brother below begins to settle the pilgrim into his bench, and the smith down at the forge falls quiet for the day, and the bell for Vespers begins faintly to be lifted off its rope in preparation for its long, slow ringing, the afternoon settles toward the gold hour, and the Scriptorium below your feet, to which you are about to return, fills slowly with the deep west light. You climb back down the ladder, and the smell of the upper room, old vellum, old wood, dust, gives way to the cooler stone smell of the Scriptorium below, and you take your place at your bench again. The Scriptorium at this hour is a different room from the one you sat in at dawn. The light has come around. The narrow eastern windows that delivered the weak honey of lords are now in shadow, and the western windows, small, square, set high in the south-facing wall, and angled to catch the late sun, have become the bright places. A long bar of warm gold leans across the room and lays itself across the boards of the desks. one by one as it travels. It is now the bar that lies on the desk 3 places down the row from yours. In a little while it will be on yours. In a little while after that it will be on the wall, and then on the floor, and then gone. The room is quiet. A few of the brothers are at their boards. The senior illuminator is back in his corner, still on the same page he was on this morning, still patient. The pages, after a full day, perhaps the breadth of a fingernail further along than it was at Lord's. He does not seem to notice the time. The senior brothers say that he does not notice the time, and that this is a kind of grace, that a man who has stopped noticing the time has been allowed by God to step a little to one side of it, and to work as if forever were a length one could lay one's hand on. You pick up your quill. The ink has settled. The day has warmed it, and it flows now as it should. You read the line you wrote this morning. You take a breath. You begin the next. The shapes of the letters come slowly. You can hear faintly your own pen on the vellum, a small dry whisper, a scratch the size of a thought, the shape of an open letter, the wide bow of A, the slow round of O, takes a small steady arc of the hand. The downstrokes of the long letters require, in your style of script, a brief held breath. The upstrokes are lifted away. The whole motion is small and slow and repeats itself. You are, in a manner that has not changed in this room in 3 generations, simply moving a hand, and this, you have come to think, is the secret of the room. The room is built to make a body do one small thing for a long time. The bench has no back. You must sit straight or your shoulders ache. The board is sloped. You cannot lean. The candle is shielded. You cannot lift your face into its light. The vellum is precious. You cannot make mistakes. Every part of the room is designed to keep your hand on its task, and after enough days, the room stops being a place that holds you. The room becomes a kind of long, quiet wave that carries you. The bench is no longer there. The board is no longer there. There is only the line, and the next line, and the very small distance between them. The brother at the desk to your right writes with a small frown that you can hear before you see, a faint exhalation through the nose, a slow shake of the head. After a moment he leans very quietly toward the margin of his page. He does not interrupt the body of the text. He simply, in a tiny hand at the edge of the vellum, writes something to himself. You cannot see what it is, but you know what it is, because every scribe in this room has, at some point, written something like it, something to mark the day, something to put a small private mark, only the size of a fingernail, against the long anonymous work. The brothers do this quietly. The senior masters pretend not to notice. The masters did it themselves when they were younger. 1,000 years from now, when men and women in cool gloved hands open the old Irish books in the great libraries, the small Latin Gospels of Ectonach, the antiphonary of Bangor, the great Prussian grammar that lived for centuries at St. Gallen, they will find in the margins, in tiny careful letters, the small private writings of brothers like the one beside you. They will find a brother saying, in plain Latin, in the margin of an Easter table, "Thank God, it will soon be dark." They will find another saying, in his own Irish, a curse on the man who has stolen my penknife. They will find a third saying, with great care, this vellum is hairy. The work itself was meant to disappear into the eternity of the page. The complaint was meant for no one, and yet the complaint is what reaches across the centuries and touches the reader on the shoulder and says, I was here, I was tired, I was cold, the vellum was hairy, the penknife is gone, the day will soon, thank God, be dark. The brother to your right lifts his pen, he breathes out, he returns to the body of the page. The small word in the margin sits where he left it. Sometimes, in this room, the marginal hand has been a different kind of hand. Some brothers, in the long, warm afternoons of the year when the work is steady and the cold of winter is far away, have laid down their work for a small private moment and have written in their own native tongue, in the white space at the edge of an entirely different book, something that no rule required and no abbot asked for, a small poem, a line about the woods outside the window, and the sound of a bird, and a quiet pleasure of being a man at a desk while the world goes on without him. A senior brother has shown you once, in a book on Latin grammar in the library, the great Priscian, copied by the Irish at St. Gallen, a tiny line in Irish in the upper margin. A wall of forest looms above, and sweetly the blackbird sings. All the birds make melody, the line goes on, over me and my books and things. The brother who wrote that was, in your country, sitting at a desk like yours. He looked up, he listened, he went back to his Latin, but before he went back, he laid down those small dozen words in his own language, and the small dozen words have outlived him by every measure that matters. He did not know he had written one of the earliest pieces of lyric verse in any European tongue, not Latin or Greek. He thought he was just naming a feeling that was sitting on his shoulder. The feeling is still there now, in the margin where he left it. You have stopped on that line before. You will stop on it again. The gold bar of light reaches your desk. It lays itself across your page. The wet ink on the vellum begins very slightly to dry faster. The bones of your right hand, where your hand grips the quill, warm slowly through the skin. You stop for a moment and let the warmth settle. You look up. The senior illuminator in his corner is mixing a small wash of green in a shallow shell. His head is bent, his shoulders are still. The light from the western window has now reached his board too, and the small interlaced knots that he has been laying down all day are picked out in their colors as the gold finds them, the small dot of orpiment yellow, the smaller dot of red, the new faint trace of green he is just laying in now. The page in this light looks alive. The page does not, of course, move, but the light moves over it, and what is on it answers the light differently every minute, and there is, for a small handful of those minutes, the strong unsettling sense that the page is breathing. You think of the brother who wrote those lines about the blackbird. You imagine him in a room not unlike this one, far across the sea, in the foothills of mountains he had walked over years before. You imagine him pausing, the way you are pausing now, with the warm strip of late light on the back of his hand. You imagine him listening for a long-held moment to the small far call of a bird outside a window, and then writing his small dozen Irish words quietly in the margin of someone else's Latin, and going on with the Latin, and never knowing that he had laid down something that would last. It is, you think, a small consolation. The work that is meant to last does not always last. The small private thing in the margin, written for no one, sometimes does. You decide in your own head not to write anything in your own margin today. Today is enough. The day will be the writing. The brother beside you takes a small piece of dry crust from his sleeve and chews it quietly and goes on writing. The novice at the cutting bench has finished his vellum for the day and has begun, by the small candle in his corner, to clean his lunellum. The smell of beeswax from the candle joins the smells already in the room. The Scriptorium accepts another small smell into itself without comment. There is a small sound at one of the windows, a soft repeated tap-tap, and you look up. A bird is on the outside of the south sill. Not a blackbird this time, a wren, brown and small, sideways on, looking with one bright black eye into the cool room. He hops once, he cocks his head, he is not alarmed. After a moment he flies away. The brother beside you has seen it too. He almost smiles. He does not write it down. He goes back to his page, and outside the bar of gold slides off your desk and onto the bench beside you, and then onto the floor, and the warm strip on your right hand cools, and the light in the room begins, almost without your noticing, to take on the quality it has when the sun is at last beginning to think about going down. The brothers in this room have watched this light, this same falling, every clear afternoon for 30 years. The senior illuminator lays his brush very gently beside his shell of green and sits back, and so as the page in front of you cools and the gold bar finds the floor, and the senior illuminator quietly closes the small lead-lined box of his pigments because there is not enough light to lay another color today, the work of the scribes draws toward its evening end, and the bell for Vespers, somewhere in the small wooden tower outside, is being lifted very gently from its rope. The bell, when it begins to ring for Vespers, is the same iron handbell that rang for vigils in the deep of the night, and for lauds at the rising of the dawn, and for prime and terce and sext and nun, the same small square mouth, the same hand on the rope. The bell ringer, who at this hour is a different brother than the one who watched the candle in the dark, lifts his arm in the same long practiced motion that every bell ringer in this house has used for 30 years, and the small clear sound goes out across the enclosure, and the brothers, in their various corners, set down what they are doing and turn toward the church. You set your quill in its small wooden rest. You wipe the point with the small linen cloth tied to the edge of your bench. You blow once, very gently, on the ink of the last line you wrote, and watch the surface of it go from a wet shine to a slow matte. You cap the inkhorn. You stand. The bench, which has held you for the last hour, releases your back with the small dull ache that always follows. You walk in slow file with the other scribes out of the Scriptorium and into the cloister, and the air outside, after the long warm gold of the upper room, comes against your face in a way that says, With great clarity, the day is ending. The light over the enclosure is now what the older brothers call the long light. The sun has dropped low enough that everything has a shadow twice as long as itself. The high cross outside the church door, a slab of grey stone twice the height of a man, carved on every side with small dense panels of figures, throws a shadow now that reaches all the way across the small cemetery beside the church, and rests its tip on the low stone wall on the far side. You have watched this shadow do this almost every clear evening for 2 years. You know, without looking up, that the sun is sitting just above the western roof line of the refectory. You know that the bell will ring twice more before the office begins. You know all the small geometries of this hour the way a man knows the shape of his own hand. The high cross in this light is the most beautiful thing in the enclosure. It is also one of the things that on this island in this century your country is best at. Each panel on its sides is a small carved scene from the book. Adam reaching for the fruit, Daniel sitting calmly in his pit among the lions, the 3 young men in the furnace standing as if they had only been called to a slightly warmer room. The cross is, in a real sense, a stone book. It is meant to be read by the brothers, yes, but it is more deeply meant to be read by the people who cannot read. The lay families on the enclosure, the pilgrims passing through, the children of the Manig running between adults' legs. The illiterate are not, in the eyes of your country, illiterate before this cross. They are simply readers of a different alphabet. The carver, dead these 40 years, was making a Bible for everyone who would never hold one. You walk past it, slowly, toward the church. Beside the cross at its foot is the small cemetery. There are stones here that go back 5 or 6 generations of monks. Most of the graves are small and unmarked, with only a low slab and a name. A few are larger. A few have stones cut in the shape of a small cross. And against the church wall, in a small enclosure of its own, are 2 graves that are larger than the others. These belong to kings. The brothers do not, as a matter of habit, talk much about this, but every brother in this house knows the names. 2 minor kings of the neighboring Tuath, the small kingdom whose lands run along the southern bank of the river, are buried here. They came in their last years with gifts of cattle and silver and land, and asked the abbot of the day to grant them burial in holy ground. The abbots agreed. The kings died. The kings were carried on biers of plain oak across the bridge by their own household and lowered into the soil here, and the brothers of the day sang for them, a mass said once at burial, then a smaller commemoration every year on the anniversary, then a smaller one in every mass thereafter forever. The endowment of cattle and silver paid, in a sense, for that forever. This is one of the small steady currents that runs through your house, and many like it. The kings of your country fear, in the small private way kings fear, that the world they are leaving will not pray for them long enough. They look at the brothers and they see men who have committed themselves to praying continuously in shifts for the rest of their lives, and for the lives of every brother who will come after them, for as long as there is a monastery here. The brother's prayer is the most reliable engine of intercession the kings can think of. And so the kings give. They give land, they give cattle, they give silver, and the monasteries, slowly, become wealthy in a way that has nothing to do with the small wooden hut of the founder 300 years ago, who had nothing but a gospel and a leather belt. The wealth makes the monasteries powerful. The power, in time, will make them entangled in the politics of their kings in ways the founder could not have imagined. None of this is in the senior brothers' minds today, exactly, but the two graves are there against the church wall, and the long shadow of the cross runs across them, and the small steady cost and benefit of holding the bodies of kings sits unspoken in the soil. You enter the church, the candles are lit, the brothers find their places in the choir. The abbot, who is older than he was at Lord's, that is, who has aged a full day the way every man ages a full day every day, stands at his stall and waits. The bell ringer outside finishes his ringing. The bell stops. The rope goes still. The silence afterward, the small breath of silence between the last clap of the bell and the first note of the chant, is the same small breath of silence that followed the bell at Vigils, when you woke into the dark, and at every office in between. The silence after the bell is the same silence every time. You begin to think of it now as the single quiet thing the day keeps coming back to. Vespers begins. The psalms of Vespers are gentler than those of Vigils. They are the songs of evening. They speak of light fading, and of being grateful for the day that has been. The voices of the brothers today are not the cracked, dry voices of 2 in the morning. They are the slightly tired but quite warm voices of men who have been awake for 16 hours and have, on the whole, done what was asked of them. The breath in the cold high roof of the church is no longer the visible breath of midwinter. The warmer air of the summer evening keeps it invisible, but the slow rising of the voices into the rafters is the same as it always is. The chant moves through the church the way slow water moves through reeds. Through the small open south door of the church, you can see the cross outside and the shadow of the cross. The shadow, while you sing, lengthens further. The tip of it slides off the far wall of the cemetery and onto the grass beyond. The sun must be very near the roofline now. The color of the world beyond the door is the warm peach gold that comes only at this hour, the light that the painters who will one day paint Bibles like this one in colored glass will spend their whole working lives trying to copy. A single bird crosses the doorway, low, then another, then the doorway is empty again. You notice, as you have noticed before at this office, that there is a kind of small relief in the singing of Vespers that the other offices do not quite have. Vigils is hard work. Lord's is a beginning. Prime, terse, sext, and nun are markers that keep the day in line. Vespers is instead a small acknowledgement. The day was given. The day has been done. The light is going. You will sing once more at Compline, and then you will sleep. The whole long shape of one human day, its first cold breath, its golden mornings, its noon meal, its long warm afternoon, has fitted itself one more time inside the same 8 offices it always fits inside. Vespers is the office that says quietly, "See, it fitted again." The body, hearing this, lets a small held thing go. The voices in the choir at Vespers are almost always a little easier than the voices at any other hour. The office ends. You stand. The brothers in their slow-ordered file leave the choir and pass through the church and out into the cloister. The cloister at this hour is a different room from the one you stood in this morning. The stones along the south wall, the ones that are warm enough in summer to sit on, have begun to give back their stored heat into the cooling air. The shadows of the small carved arches lie flat across the path. You stop for a small moment beside the cross. You look up at the panel of the 3 young men in the furnace. They stand in carved stone, untouched, as if to say, even fire is, in the end, a thing one can stand inside if one stands together. The panel is very old, the carver is gone, the kings beneath the cross are gone. The cross remains. The shadow of the cross moves across the cemetery every clear evening, exactly as far as the wall, and lays itself there, and then night takes it. The brothers move on toward the guest house. The pilgrim is sitting on the stone bench by the door, his pack at his feet, looking very tired but quite calm. The guest master has lit a small fire in the hearth, and the smoke is going up cleanly through the hole in the roof, and there is a small wooden tub of water warming on the stones beside the fire. The fire is for the room, the water is for his feet, and so as the last of the warm peach light leaves the top of the high cross, and the bell ringer hangs the small iron bell back on its hook by the door of the church, and the abbot, somewhere across the cloister, takes a slow breath and walks alone toward the small back room where he eats his solitary evening meal. The day moves quietly into its last working hour, and you, with 2 of the senior brothers, turn toward the guest house and toward the bench where the traveller is waiting. The guest house at this hour is the warmest room on the enclosure. The hearth has been lit since just before Vespers, and the small fire, peat and split oak, has been burning long enough that the stones around it have begun to give the heat back into the room, slow and even, the way warm stones always give. The pilgrim sitting on the wooden bench by the door has taken off his hat. He has a thin grey beard that he probably did not have when he left home, and very tired eyes, and the slow, careful way of moving of a man who has been walking longer than he meant to. He has a cup of small beer in one hand and a piece of yesterday's bread in the other. He has not finished either of them. He is not in a hurry. You come in quietly, with the gate brother and 1 of the senior brothers, and you stand a small distance away from the bench while the pilgrim looks up. He nods. He does not speak. He has been told you can see what is about to happen. He has been told perhaps what happens at every house like this one. He does not look surprised. He looks instead simply tired and willing. The senior brother walks to the hearth, lifts the small wooden tub from where it has been warming on the flat stones beside the fire, and carries it back across the floor with both hands, slowly, taking care that the water inside does not spill. The water is dark with the small leaves of an herb the infirmarian dropped in earlier. Rosemary, you think, perhaps a leaf or 2 of mint as well. The water gives off a soft, sweet smell that mixes in the warm room with the smell of the peat fire and the smell of the road still on the pilgrim's cloak. The senior brother sets the tub on the floor, 2 paces in front of the bench. The gate brother places a folded square of clean linen beside it. The senior brother nods to you. You kneel. The stones of the floor, even through your robe, are cool against your knees. You bend very slowly, and you unlace the small leather thong of the pilgrim's left sandal. The sandal is much worn. The sole at the ball of the foot is almost worn through, and there is a small dark stain on the inside of the strap where a blister somewhere days ago opened and dried again. You ease the sandal off. The foot underneath is plain and tired. The skin is dusted with the dust of the road. The toes are blunted with walking. There is a small fresh scrape along the outside of the ankle bone where the man clipped a stone somewhere this afternoon. You place his foot very gently in the warm water. He lets out a small breath. Not a word. The rule of the house at this hour does not strictly require silence, but he has perhaps picked up the cue of your quiet. Only a small breath, the breath of a man whose body has just been told, by a small mute kindness, that the walking is for tonight done. The breath is small, but you hear it. The senior brother hears it too. He does not look. You take a small handful of the warm herb water, and you let it run gently over the top of the foot. You rub the dust away with the heel of your hand. You do not scrub. Scrubbing, the senior brother has told you, is for a man's own feet at his own bath. The washing of a guest's feet is a slower, softer thing. You let the water do most of the work. The dust dissolves. The scrape at the ankle bone, when the water reaches it, makes the pilgrim breathe in once and out again, but he does not flinch. You touch it carefully. You move on. This small gesture, the warm water, the kneeling brother, the stranger's foot, is in your country, in your century, one of the oldest things you do. It comes, every brother in this room knows, from a small scene at the end of the Gospels. The night before his death, the master who founded your whole long order of life knelt down in a room very far from here and washed the feet of the men who would scatter and forget him by morning. He used a basin like the one in front of you. He used a cloth like the one folded by the tub. He said in words your liturgy still quotes, a kind of small new commandment. Asterisk mandatum novum asterisk, that the brothers love one another. The word for the gesture itself has come down, plain and short. Mandatum, the command. You are, in a literal sense, obeying it. The brothers in this room have been obeying it, in different rooms, in different houses, on this island and on others, every time a tired stranger has come to a door, for more than 300 years. The water is warm, the cloth is rough, the command has not changed. You lift the foot from the water. You set the linen cloth across your knee. You place the foot on the cloth. You dry it slowly, the top first, then the sole, then between the toes, where the dust collects most stubbornly. You set the foot, when it is dry, back on the floor on a second small square of clean linen the gate brother has spread there. You do not look up at the man's face. The senior brother has told you that the man in this moment is often quite close to weeping, and that it is a small grace not to make him meet your eyes. You unlace the second sandal. You begin again. The second foot is in worse shape than the first. There is along the heel a long thin crack in the skin that opens and closes when you turn the foot. You touch the crack carefully with a small piece of clean linen soaked in the warm water. The pilgrim breathes out once. You finish. You dry. You set the foot like the first on the linen at the floor. You sit back on your heels. The senior brother lifts the small wooden tub. The gate brother brings a small clay pot from the shelf, honey, and applies a small careful film of it along the crack on the pilgrim's heel, and lays a square of clean linen over it, and ties it gently with a short strip of cloth. The honey, the infirmarian has said, will draw the badness out. By morning the heel will already be different. You watched the infirmarian in the herb garden this afternoon talk calmly about exactly this. You did not know at the time that the wound was about to be the wound under your hand. You think as your hands move of all the feet that have rested in tubs like this one in this same enclosure since the founder's day. The road to this monastery is old. Pilgrims have come on it for 200 years. Brothers have knelt on stones like these and washed feet like these for as many. Most of those feet are now in the soil. Most of those brothers are also in the soil. The water in the tub, you think, has been more or less the same water for 2 centuries, drawn from the same river, warmed by the same kind of fire, scented by the same herbs from the same kind of garden. The feet change, the water in some old sense does not. There is a small steady pulse in this, the long quiet repetition that holds the place together, and you let yourself feel it for one careful breath before you go back to drying the foot. The pilgrim very quietly says, in the language of your country, in a soft accent that places him from somewhere north of here, perhaps near the lakes, thank you. It is the first word any of you has spoken since you came in. The senior brother nods once and does not answer. You stand. The water in the tub has gone cool. You carry it in both hands slowly out the door of the guest house. You pour it onto the grass beyond the threshold. The grass takes it. The small leaves of rosemary and mint settle in the wet. The smell rises, a last small breath, and goes. When you go back inside, the guest house has been set up for the night. The gate brother has laid a wool blanket on the simple bed in the corner. He has set a small wooden cup of water within reach. He has set on the small stool beside the bed the pilgrim's own pack, where the pilgrim can see it. He has banked the fire so that it will burn slow and quiet through the night without needing tending. The room, in the soft light of the banked fire and the single hanging oil lamp, has the still warm look of a place that has been arranged with great quiet attention for one person. The pilgrim is by now half asleep on the bench. He has not yet moved to the bed. The gate brother, who has done this many times, waits without speaking until the pilgrim's head begins, almost without his noticing, to nod toward his own chest. Then the gate brother gently touches the pilgrim's shoulder, once and very lightly, and the pilgrim looks up and nods and stands and crosses to the bed and lowers himself onto it and lies down with the small, careful, slow motion of a man whose body has been on a road for a long time. The blanket is drawn up over him. He is asleep almost before the gate brother has finished settling it around his shoulders. You step out into the cloister. The sky over the enclosure is no longer the warm peach of Vespers. The color has cooled, has gone through the slow grey blue of late dusk, and is now nearly the deep slate of full evening, with the first few stars just barely showing in the east. The cattle on the far side of the wall have settled. The smith's forge is dark. The mill is silent. The brewhouse smell is gone, replaced by the faint cooler smell of the herb garden through the open garden gate, where the bunches of yarrow on their string are very still. The brothers walk in slow file toward the church. The bell will ring very soon now for Compline, the last office, the office of falling light. Your work is done. The pilgrim is fed and warm, and his feet are clean. The day in every practical sense has been completed, and so as the sky settles toward its deeper blue, and the small lamps in the guest house and the dormitory and the church are lit one by one along the inside of the wall, and the bell ringer in his small wooden tower lifts the rope of the iron bell once more for the day, the brothers move quietly toward the last office, and the great silence, the long unbroken silence that runs from Compline to Lord's, the silence you woke into in the deep of last night, begins, very gently, to gather itself around the enclosure. The bell, when it rings for Compline, is the same bell, the same small square iron mouth, the same hand on the rope, the same long practiced motion of the arm in the small wooden tower outside the church door. You have heard this bell today 8 separate times. You heard it in the deep dark, when the candle in the bell ringer's room had burned down past its first ring. You heard it before the honey light of lards. You heard it after the cold work in the Scriptorium for prime. You heard it on your walk back from the mill for sext. You heard it in the warm middle of the afternoon for none. You heard it as the long shadow of the high cross reached across the cemetery for Vespers, and now you hear it once more, for the last office of the day, the smallest and shortest, the one the older brothers say is the most beautiful, the one whose Latin opening, telucis ante terminum, means in plain English, before the ending of the light. The light has in fact mostly ended. The sky over the enclosure is now the deep slate of full evening, with a strong scatter of stars showing where the cloud has cleared. The cross outside the church door is no longer a stone book with carved panels. It is a tall dark shape against the slightly lighter dark of the sky. The panels, Adam, Daniel, the 3 young men in the furnace, are still there, but they are sleeping for the night, the way the carved figures sleep when nobody can see them. They will be visible again at Lord's. You walk into the church. The candles in the choir are lit, but only a few of them, and only the small ones, the ones the brothers use for offices in the dark. The room is dim and warm. The smell in this office is the smell of warm beeswax and of stone that has been holding the day's small heat. The brothers in their stalls are quieter than they have been at any other office. Compline is the office that says, simply, the day is done. There is no more work to argue about. There is no more reading. The book is closed. The abbot, at his place, makes the sign of the cross. The brothers in their stalls make the sign of the cross. The office begins. It is short. There are 3 psalms. There is a small hymn. There is a single reading no longer than a quiet held breath. The brothers sing them softly. The voices at this hour are voices that no longer try to reach the high roof of the church. The voices stay low, close to the floor, near the candles. The chant moves through the room the way slow water moves through the small reeds at the edge of the river, without effort, without claim, without the need to be heard by anyone except the small lit space close around it. The hymn, when it comes, is the hymn that every monastery in your country sings at this hour, the hymn that all Compline through the kingdoms of the West has sung for hundreds of years and will sing for 1,000 more. Telucis ante terminum, before the ending of the light. The Latin is short and old, and the brothers know every word the way they know the shapes of the small bells of their own house. The hymn asks God to keep them through the night, to keep their dreams clean, to keep them safe until the bell rings again for vigils and the long unbroken cycle begins once more. You sing it. You have sung it every night since the year you arrived. While you sing, the day plays itself back in small, slow pieces. You see, without trying to see, the candle in the bell ringer's small wooden room, burned down now past how many rings, you cannot say, but down past most of them. You see the slow drip of the water in the small copper-spouted clepsydra beside it, still falling, drop by drop, into its basin as it has been all day. You see the cattle, settled now on the far side of the wall, lying in the slow large breath of an animal that has eaten and is asleep. You see the smith's forge dark, the coals banked. You see the brewhouse door closed. You see the mill silent, the sluice gate down. You see the long bench in the refectory empty, the reader's pulpit empty, the linen on the tables put away. You see the herb garden in the dark, rosemary, mint, yarrow on its string in the drying shed, all of it sleeping now. The small wooden hive at the corner with the bees inside, also sleeping. You see the high cross outside the church door, dark, with the 2 kings' graves at its feet, and the long shadow that has been there at every Vespers all year now, folded back inside it and gone for the night. You see the pilgrim in the guest house, his bandaged heel under the wool blanket, asleep. You see the long dormitory, the rush mats laid out, empty and waiting, the cold stone floor still warm from the day. You see your own bench at your own desk in the Scriptorium, the inkhorn capped, the quill in its rest, the half-finished page covered with a small square of clean linen against the dust. The day you think fits. The day has fitted itself, again inside its 8 offices. It has fitted inside the small round of bells and candles and tubs and feet and pages and oats and milk and water. Nothing fell off the edge. Nothing was left undone. The day has done what a day is asked to do. The hymn says, in its small Latin sentence, before the ending of the light, and the light has very nearly ended. The hymn says, keep us, the brothers ask. The brothers will be asked again tomorrow. The brothers will ask again tomorrow. The hymn ends. The reading is read. The small final prayer is said. The abbot at his place makes the sign of the cross. The brothers in their stalls make the sign of the cross. The voices, which have been very quiet through the whole office, are now nothing at all. The great silence begins. It begins as gently as a cloth being laid down on a table. There is no announcement. There is no shift in posture. There is only the small, unmistakable change in the air of the church, the way a room changes when everyone in it has, at the same moment, decided not to speak again. From now until the bell rings for lauds tomorrow, in this house, in your country, no brother will speak a word. The rule is old. The rule is honored. The rule has been honored in this room every night for 140 years. You stand. You file in slow ordered line with the others, out of the church and into the cloister. The cloister is cool and dark. The stones along the south wall, which were warm enough to lean against an hour ago, have given back what they stored and are cool again. The sky above the cloister is the high deep blue of a clear summer night in your country, and the stars are now fully out. You glance up. Orion has not yet appeared. Orion is a winter friend. He is below the world for now, but the small bright group of stars the older brothers call the sieve, and the great slow river of pale stars that runs from the north of the sky down toward the south, are there. The brothers say the river of stars is the road the souls of the just take after they leave the body. You do not know whether you believe this. You do not have to know tonight. The road is there. The road is beautiful. That is enough. The brothers walk in silent file toward the dormitory. The door of the dormitory is open. The single rushlight at the far end has been lit by the gate brother as part of his evening rounds. The rush mats are laid out in their rows. The wool blankets are folded at the foot of each mat. The cold of the stone floor is the same cold you stepped onto hours and hours ago when the bell rang for vigils in the deep of last night. The cold is the same. You are not the same. A day has passed through you, and you are softer in some places and sorer in others, and there is a small new line of pigment under one fingernail, and a small new memory of a tired stranger's feet under your hands, and a small slow tiredness in the back of your neck that you did not have when the day began. You walk down the long room. Your feet, in their soft leather sandals, make almost no sound on the stones. The brother in front of you is the same brother who walked in front of you in the long procession to Vigils, what feels like a very long time ago, although it was only this morning, or perhaps it is more honest to say only last night. The same slight stoop, the same patient slow step. The whole day, in that sense, has been the small distance between his back and yours. You cross to your mat, you sit down on it, you take off your sandals, you set them neatly beside the mat. You unbelt your robe and lie down. The robe stays on, the blanket is drawn over you. The rush of the mat presses lightly against your back. You close your eyes. For a small moment, the day plays itself back once more, in even smaller pieces. The cold of the stone floor and your feet at Vigils, the honey light at Lauds, the shape of the grey goose feather quill in your hand, the small leather pouch of blue powder, opened, closed, the slow careful weight of the pestle, the smell of the mill, wood and stone and water, the taste of warm small beer from the miller's wooden mug, the bench in the refectory, the sign for bread, the yarrow under your hands, the bee that came twice, the pilgrim's worn foot in the warm herb water, the carved panel of the 3 young men in the furnace, the bell, the bell, the bell. The pieces drift past, in no order anyone could have planned, the way the small pieces of any human day drift past the inside of a closing eye. They go on a little longer than you mean them to, and then they slow, and they grow soft at the edges, and they begin very gently to dissolve. The room is full of 40 soft sounds, the slow breath of 40 men who have just lain down after a long day. None of them is speaking. None of them will speak now until the bell rings again. The great silence holds, and so as the single rushlight at the far end of the dormitory burns low, and the bell ringer in his small wooden room sets a fresh candle on its iron stand for the night's watch, and the river beyond the wall keeps moving in its long, unbroken sentence, the day ends very gently, and the night begins, and the small, slow drift towards sleep, which is the last work of any day in any monastery, begins very gently all along the long room. The night is held. The dormitory is dark. The single rushlight at the far end has burnt itself down to a small dim glow, no bigger than the inside of a cupped hand. The cold of the stones is the same cold the stones have held all year. The blanket over you is warm. The rush mat under you is rough, but it has been your mat for 2 years, and your body knows its slight unevennesses. The brothers around you are breathing 40 slow breaths in a long, low room. None of them is the same as another. Some are deep, some are quick. The brother to your right breathes a little raggedly, the way he has breathed at night since the winter he had the fever, and the infirmarian sat with him for 3 days. The brother to your left breathes evenly, very softly, almost as if he were not there. The young novice 4 mats down breathes through a faintly open mouth, the way young men do when they are very tired. The senior illuminator, somewhere in the row behind you, breathes the way he draws, slowly, patiently, with long pauses between. The great silence holds. Outside, the river is moving. The Shannon, at this hour, in this stretch, is wide and slow and dark. It is moving its long, unbroken sentence past the island, the way it has moved its long, unbroken sentence past the island for as long as anyone has been here, and longer. The river was here before the founder. The river will be here after the last of you. The river does not know the brothers are sleeping. The river does not need to know. It moves. On the far side of the wall, the cattle are settled. They are lying in the field in their slow, heavy way, the calves close to the cows, the herd close to itself. They make now and then a small sound, a long out breath, a small shift of weight, then quiet again. The smith's forge is cold. The brewhouse is closed. The mill is still. The herb garden on the other side of the cloister is dark. The bunches of yarrow on their string in the drying shed are not moving. The small wooden hive is silent. The bees inside are warm against one another and asleep. The high cross in the small cemetery beside the church is a tall, dark shape. The carved panels, Adam, Daniel, the 3 young men in the furnace, are sleeping. The 2 kings' graves at its foot are quiet. The endowment of cattle and silver and land is sleeping with them. The scriptorium is dark. The boards of the desks have cooled. The inkhorns are capped. The blue pigment in its small lead-lined box is closed, and on its shelf, the single half-finished page on your own desk is covered with a small square of clean linen against the dust. The refectory is dark. The 2 long tables are wiped. The reader's pulpit is empty. The book of the life of Anthony, which was read aloud at the noon meal, is closed and back on its shelf. The small linen squares each brother sat behind have been gathered, washed, and folded for the morning. The small chapter house off the cloister is dark. The abbot's wooden chair is empty. The carved arms are cool. The codex on the lectern is closed. The pigment shed at the back of the scriptorium is dark. The yellow box of orpiment is closed. The red box is closed. The green box is closed. The black box, the box of oak galls and iron sulfate and gum arabic, is closed. The smallest box, the box that holds the blue, is closed too, sitting in its small lead-lined corner, with its mineral powder fine as the shadow of a color, waiting. In the guest house, the pilgrim is asleep. The bandage on his heel is warm, with honey under the cloth. His pack is at the foot of the bed. The fire is banked. The smoke is going up cleanly through the hole in the roof. He is not dreaming about anything in particular. He is, simply, no longer walking. The iron bell hangs on its rope by the door of the church. The rope is still. The bell ringer, in his small wooden room, is on his stool. The candle on its iron stand is fresh. The candle has perhaps 3 rings still to burn before he must pull the rope for vigils. He is awake. He is the only fully awake man on the enclosure tonight. He is watching the candle. The drip from the clepsydra is going, drop, into the basin below. He is comfortable. He is not lonely. The night, for him, is its own kind of friend. He has done this many times. The river is moving. The brothers are breathing. The great silence holds. You notice in the small low part of your mind that still notices things, that the cold of the stones is no longer reaching up through the mat the way it did at Vigils last night. Your body has warmed the mat. The mat has, in a small way, warmed the floor beneath it. The cold is still there, but the cold is no longer the only thing. You notice in the same low part of your mind that your shoulders, which were tight, are no longer tight. The slow patient muscles along the back of the neck, which carried the small ache of the scribe's bench through the late afternoon, have, at some point in the last few minutes, let go. The hand that ground the blue pigment has stopped feeling the small soreness in the thumb. The hand that washed the pilgrim's feet has stopped feeling anything at all. The body is going. The body is willing to go. You let it. You let the small ache in the back of the neck go. You let the small tiredness behind the eyes go. You let the small stiffness in the right hand, the writing hand, the grinding hand, the washing hand go. You let the smell of peat smoke that was on the robe at noon, and the smell of cattle that was on it before that, and the smell of porridge and butter that was on it after, and the smell of rosemary and mint that the herb garden left on it, and the smell of warm honey from the guest house, and the small clean smell of beeswax from the church. You let all of them, in their slow layered way, settle and stay where they have settled and not need to be thought about any more. You let the bell go. You let the rope go. You let the candle go. Outside, in the high deep dark, the river of stars the older brothers call the road of souls is still there. You cannot see it with your eyes closed, but you remember it from the cloister a few minutes ago. The road runs from the north of the sky toward the south. The brothers say the just go that way. You do not know whether you believe it. You do not have to know. The road is there. The road is beautiful. That is enough. The river is moving. The brothers are breathing. The great silence holds. In a few hours, the candle in the bell ringer's room will burn down past its last ring. The bell ringer will set his small piece of wood and his small piece of charcoal aside. He will stand. He will walk to the door. He will lift the rope. He will pull. The small square iron bell will ring out across the cold cloister, and the brothers will sit up on their rush mats, and the day will begin again. The whole long shape of one human day in monastic Ireland will fit itself once more into its 8 offices. But that is not yet. For now, the candle is still burning, the drip is still dripping, the river is still moving, the brothers are still breathing, the great silence is still holding. You notice you are no longer noticing. The edges of things are soft. The room is far away. The blanket is warm. The long day is far behind. The cold of last night's vigils, far. The honey light of lauds, far. The cold scriptorium of the morning, far. The slow grinding of the blue powder, far. The mill clack and the smell of grain, far. The noon meal and the sign for bread, far. The herb garden and the yarrow bunches, far. The window with the wren, far. The long shadow of the high cross, far. The warm tub and the worn foot, far. The hymn at Compline, far. All of it, far. None of it is gone. None of it has to be held. It has all been put down. The river is moving. The brothers are breathing. There is nothing more to do. There is nothing more to hold. The day was given. The day was done. The day fitted again inside its 8 offices. The day will come again when the bell rings. Until then, only this, only the river, only the breath, only the great silence, only the small warm darkness inside the closed eyes. The candle burns, the drip drips, the river moves, the brothers breathe, the candle burns, the drip drips, the river moves, the brothers breathe, the night is held. The stones of the dormitory are cool. The stones of the cloister are cool. The stones of the church are cool. The stones of the wall are cool. The stones along the south bench, which were warm enough to lean against at noon, are cool again. The stones of the high cross outside the church door are cool. The stones of the small king's graves at the foot of the high cross are cool. The stones of the small wooden bridge over the mill stream, the timbers, not the stones, are cool. The stones of the herb garden walls are cool. The stones of the guest house hearth, which were warm enough to warm the water for the pilgrim's feet, are still a little warm under the banked fire, but they are giving back their warmth slowly, and the room is cooling around the sleeping man, and that is all right too. The river is still moving. The brothers are still breathing. The candle is still burning. The night is held, and held, and held, and somewhere very softly, somewhere quite far from the cold floor of the dormitory. You have stopped following the words, and you have stopped following the room, and you have stopped following anything at all, and the night, in its long, patient way, is taking you the rest of the way. The river is moving. The brothers are breathing. The great silence holds. It is all right. It is all right to let go now. The day has been done. The candle is still burning. The bell is still hanging on its rope. The river is still moving past the island. None of it needs you tonight. The day will be there when you are needed again. For now, sleep. For now, the small warm dark. For now, the river, the breath, the held silence. For now, nothing. For now, rest. And now, very gently, we begin to pull back from the small lit island on the river. The dormitory recedes. The 40 sleeping brothers, their slow breathing, their grey blankets, the single rushlight that has burned down to almost nothing, all of it folds quietly behind us. The cloister falls behind, the stones of the south bench, the small carved arches, the cool path between them, they fall behind. The church falls behind. The candles in the choir are guttering low. The wooden cross at the altar is in shadow. The hymn that was sung an hour ago, to Lucis ante terminum, before the ending of the light, is gone into the cold air of the high roof, and has settled there the way all old chants settle into the wood and the stone. The high cross outside the church door, with its carved panels of Adam and Daniel and the 3 young men in the furnace, is now only a darker shape against the deeper dark of the sky. The 2 kings' graves at its foot are quiet. The smith's forge, the brewhouse, the mill, the herb garden, all of them asleep. The guest house, with the pilgrim warm and dreaming of nothing in particular, falls behind. The small wooden tower with the iron bell, and the bell ringer in his cell, watching his fresh candle burn slowly toward the next mark, they fall behind too. He will pull the rope when the time comes. The bell will ring. The brothers will rise. The day will fit once more into its 8 offices, but that is for the hours to come, and we are no longer there. We are above the island now. The river Shannon moves below, broad, slow, dark, threaded with the faint silver of a clear summer night. The small enclosure becomes a single point of warmth on the long dark land. The road, the gate, the small fields with the settled cattle, the daughter houses downriver, all of it draws back into one quiet small place. The centuries move. The brothers in the dormitory tonight will be in the soil before long. Other brothers will lie on their mats. The Vikings in a generation or 2 will come up the Shannon, and the round tower the abbot is planning will at last be built, and the doors will be set high above the ground. The Book of Kells, somewhere on the island of Iona tonight, will eventually be carried to safety in a monastery whose name will travel with it. The blue pigment we believe today was lapis lazuli will, much later, turn out to have been woad. The space between the words on this page that you cannot see will keep being there century after century, until you, in your own bed, read them now. The small lit island on the river, in the long view, settles into the past. The past holds it gently. The night holds you gently too. You are no longer a young monk on the Shannon. You are yourself in your own bed, in your own century, with your own warm blanket and your own slow breath. The day in monastic Ireland is folded shut. The book is closed. The lamp is dim. There is nothing more you need to hold. Close your eyes. Let the river go. Let the bell go. Let the candle go. Slow your breath. Let the island fade. Let the night come close. There is nothing left to do. There is nothing left to hold. Let your shoulders drop. Let the day go. Rest now. Sleep